You know that feeling when you're lying in bed at 3 a.m., replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, analyzing every word, every pause, every micro-expression. Everyone's told you it's overthinking. They've called it anxiety, but Carl Jung would tell you something completely different. This isn't a disorder. It's a rare empathic processing system that only certain minds possess. And if you have it, you're not broken. You're operating on a level most people will never reach. This habit you've been taught to suppress? It's actually a hidden psychological superpower waiting to be integrated. Let's explore what's really happening in your mind. Here's what society gets wrong. When you can't stop replaying conversations, everyone rushes to label it. Social anxiety, rumination, overthinking. They tell you to let it go, to stop being so sensitive, to just move on. But Jung would argue that telling you to let it go is actually asking you to become unconscious. It's asking you to ignore the most sophisticated data processing function your psyche possesses. The replay isn't random. It's not weakness. It's your mind doing exactly what it was designed to do. You're part of a smaller percentage of the population, the introverted intuitives, the deep feelers, the ones Jung identified as having access to layers of reality that others simply cannot perceive. While most people process social interactions at surface level, your mind goes deeper, much deeper. And that depth comes with a cost, but also with gifts that are genuinely rare. Think about how most people move through their day. They have a conversation, they take it at face value, they move on. But you can't do that. Something in you won't let you. And for years, you've probably thought this was your weakness, that you're too sensitive, that you overthink everything, that you need to just relax and be normal like everyone else. But what if normal means unconscious? What if normal means missing 90% of what's actually happening in human interactions? Because here's the truth. Most people are operating on autopilot. They're responding to social cues without actually processing them. They're accepting surface-level explanations without questioning what lies beneath. They're moving through life half asleep, never stopping to ask if what they're seeing is actually real. But you can't do that. Your mind won't let you stay unconscious. It forces you to look deeper, to question more, to see what others are blind to. And yes, this is exhausting. But it's also what makes you dangerous to people who rely on deception. Let's talk about the first trait, the shadow detector. This is your ability to decode subtext that others miss entirely. Consider a case profile often observed in therapeutic settings. Someone sits across from you at lunch. They smile. They say the right words. Everything seems fine on the surface. But something feels off. You can't name it in the moment. It's just a whisper in your gut, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that you register but can't yet articulate. So later, alone, you replay the conversation, and that's when you catch it. The slight hesitation before they answered your question, the way their eyes shifted left when they said they were happy for you, the micro pause that betrayed doubt or dishonesty. You're not replaying because you're insecure. You're replaying because your intuition detected shadow content. Shadow, in Jungian terms, is the hidden, repressed, or unacknowledged part of a person. It's the lie beneath the smile, the aggression hidden in politeness, the envy disguised as support. Most people can't see it because they're not looking, but you felt it. Your nervous system registered a discrepancy between what was said and what was true, and now your mind is doing an audit. This is high-level psychological work. You're not obsessing. You're extracting truth from an interaction that contained deception. Your mind won't let it go because it knows something was wrong, and it's right. This is predictive empathy in action. Your subconscious picked up signals your conscious mind missed. Now it's bringing them into awareness so you can protect yourself, so you can see people clearly, so you can navigate a world full of masks with your eyes open. And here's what makes this trait so valuable. You're essentially running a background security system that most people don't have. While others are taking people at their word, you're cross-referencing their words with their tone, their body language, their energy, their history. You're asking, does this add up? Does this match what I know about this person? Is there congruence between what they're saying and what they're showing? And when the answer is no, your system flags it. It won't let you forget. It won't let you ignore. It demands that you pay attention. The second trait builds on the first, the emotional simulator. This is where things get fascinating. You're not just remembering conversations. You're running simulations. You're training your nervous system for future conflicts. Let's look at a narrative illustration commonly seen in interpersonal dynamics. Imagine someone said something passive-aggressive to you at work. You smiled and moved on. But at night, you replay it over and over, except you're not just replaying, you're testing responses. What if I had said this? What if I had called them out? What if I had stayed silent but held eye contact longer? This isn't rumination, it's mental rehearsal. Athletes do this before a big game. They visualize every possible scenario, every move, every counter move. Soldiers do this before combat. They run through tactical situations in their minds until their responses become automatic. Your mind is doing the exact same thing, because on some level, you know this person will test you again. And next time, you won't be caught off guard. You'll have already lived through 10 versions of that conversation in your head. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. You'll know which responses feel true to you and which ones don't. You'll have mapped their tactics. You'll see the attack coming before it lands. Jung called this active imagination. It's the process of engaging with unconscious material consciously. You're taking a real interaction and running it through different scenarios to extract wisdom, to build competence, to understand human behavior at a level most people never reach. This is why empaths often seem to know what someone will say before they say it, because they've already run the simulation. They've already seen the pattern play out in their mind. The replay isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's your mind turning defense into offense, turning past pain into future preparedness. And think about the evolutionary advantage here. Your ancestors who could predict threats survived. The ones who could read between the lines, who could sense danger before it became obvious, who could prepare for conflict before it arrived, those were the ones who made it. You carry that genetic wisdom. That hypervigilance isn't anxiety, it's intelligence. It's your system keeping you safe in a world where not everyone has good intentions. But there's a third trait that might be the most important: the integration protocol. This is about moral alignment. Consider a composite example based on strictly observed patterns in psychological practice. You get into an argument. It gets heated. Later, you can't stop replaying it. But here's what's interesting. You're not just replaying what they said. You're replaying what you said. You're checking yourself. Did I stay true to my values? Did I say something I didn't mean out of anger? Did I betray my own standards? This is the judge archetype at work. And it's not judging others. It's judging you. This is internal integrity work. You replay conversations to ensure you remain aligned with who you want to be, not who others expect, not who society says you should be, but who you truly are at your core. This is why the replay can feel so uncomfortable, because sometimes you catch yourself failing your own test. You realize you were reactive, you were petty, you were dishonest, and now your psyche demands that you reconcile it. This is conscience in its purest form. Most people don't have this level of self-scrutiny. They say what they say and move on. They justify their behavior and forget about it. But you can't, because your mind holds you accountable. It won't let you become unconscious. It won't let you drift into patterns that violate your deepest sense of right and wrong. And yes, this is exhausting. Yes, it keeps you up at night, but it also keeps you honest. It keeps you growing. It keeps you from becoming the kind of person who harms others without even noticing. This trait is what separates conscious people from unconscious ones. Unconscious people repeat the same patterns forever because they never stop to examine their behavior. They never ask, did I do the right thing? They never replay their words to check for alignment. But you do. And that means you're constantly evolving, constantly refining, constantly becoming more of who you're meant to be. This is individuation in action. This is the Jungian path of becoming whole. Now let's address the shadow side, because everything has a shadow, including this gift. If this process remains unconscious, if you don't take control of it, it becomes what I call the loop of doom. This is when the replay stops being useful and starts being destructive. This is when you're not extracting wisdom anymore. You're just torturing yourself. You're replaying the same scene 100 times with no new insight. Just shame, just regret, just spiraling anxiety that leads nowhere. This happens when the replay becomes compulsive instead of conscious, when you're no longer asking, what can I learn from this, but instead asking, why am I so stupid? Why did I say that? Why can't I just be normal? The loop of doom doesn't seek resolution, it seeks punishment. And if you stay in it too long, it leads to burnout. It leads to isolation. Because you start avoiding people altogether. You think if I don't interact, I won't have anything to replay. But that's not integration. That's withdrawal. That's letting the shadow win. Jung warned about this. He said the unconscious, when left unattended, becomes tyrannical. It takes over. The replay that could have been a tool for growth becomes a prison. And the worst part is, you start to believe the cultural narrative. You start to think there really is something wrong with you, that you really are too sensitive, too broken, too much, and that belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You shrink, you hide, you lose access to the very gifts that make you rare. The loop of doom also feeds on perfectionism. It tells you that you should have said the perfect thing, that you should have handled it flawlessly, that anything less than perfection means you failed. But perfection is a trap. It's an impossible standard that keeps you stuck. Because no matter how many times you replay the conversation, no matter how many alternate responses you imagine, none of them will ever feel perfect enough. And so you stay trapped in the loop, chasing an ideal that doesn't exist. So what's the solution? How do you transform this from obsession into analysis? How do you reclaim control? The answer is surprisingly simple, but requires real commitment. You don't stop replaying conversations. You start doing it consciously. You turn it into a practice instead of a problem. Think of it as psychological digestion. Just as your body needs time to break down food and extract nutrients, your psyche needs time to break down social interactions and extract wisdom. But digestion requires intention. You can't just passively replay. You have to actively engage. Here's how. When you catch yourself replaying a conversation, stop and ask 3 questions. First, what truth is my intuition trying to show me? What did I sense that I didn't fully understand in the moment? Second, what is this interaction teaching me about patterns? Have I seen this dynamic before? Is this a theme in my life? Third, did I stay aligned with my values? Did I show up as the person I want to be? These 3 questions transform passive rumination into active integration. They give your mind a job, a purpose. Instead of spinning in circles, you're moving toward resolution. And here's what changes. Once you do this consciously, the anxiety stops, because you're no longer at the mercy of the replay. You're directing it. You're using it. You're in the driver's seat. The conversation that used to keep You up for 3 nights now gets processed in 20 minutes because you extracted what you needed. You learned the lesson. You integrated the wisdom, and now you can let it go. Not because someone told you to, but because you're actually done with it. This is what Jung meant by making the unconscious conscious. The replay was always trying to bring something into awareness. But when you fought it, when you resisted it, when you shamed yourself for it, you pushed it back down. And so it had to keep coming back, louder, more persistent, more painful. But when you meet it with curiosity instead of judgment, when you ask, "What are you trying to teach me?" instead of "What's wrong with me?" everything shifts. The replay becomes a conversation with your deeper self. And that conversation is where real growth happens. Now let's talk about what this means for your life, because understanding this intellectually is one thing, living it is another. If you're someone who replays conversations, you've probably been told your whole life to toughen up, to stop being so sensitive, to let things roll off your back. But what if sensitivity isn't the problem? What if it's actually your greatest strength? Jung believed that the most conscious individuals are the ones who feel the most. Because feeling is how we process truth. Logic can be manipulated. Facts can be twisted. But feeling cuts through all of that. It tells you what's real. And if you're highly sensitive, you're feeling things that others don't even register. You're picking up emotional frequencies that most people are deaf to. This makes life harder, yes, but it also makes you essential. Because in a world full of deception, projection, and unconscious behavior, people like you are the truth tellers. You're the ones who see what's really happening beneath the surface. You're the ones who call out the lies, the manipulation, the shadow. Not because you're trying to cause trouble, but because you can't unsee what you've seen. This is why empaths are often targeted. People who are operating unconsciously don't like being seen. They don't like having their masks pulled off, so they call you crazy. They call you too much. They gaslight you into thinking your perceptions aren't real. But your perceptions are real. That uncomfortable feeling you got during that conversation, it was accurate. That sense that someone was lying, they were. That intuition that told you to walk away, it was right. You don't need external validation for what you already know internally. But here's the challenge. You have to trust yourself. And that's hard when you've been conditioned to doubt your own instincts. When you've been told over and over that you're overreacting, that you're reading too much into things, that you're making problems where there are none. This is why the replay happens. Because part of you still doesn't trust what you felt. Part of you is still trying to gather evidence to prove to yourself that you weren't imagining it. And that's okay. That's part of the process. But eventually, you have to reach a point where you don't need proof, where you trust your intuition on the first pass. That's mastery. That's when the replay becomes optional instead of compulsive. You still have the ability. You can still analyze interactions when you need to, but you're no longer enslaved by it. You're no longer held hostage by your own mind. You've integrated the gift. You've made peace with your wiring. And from that place, you can finally use this trait the way it was meant to be used, as a tool for discernment, as a shield against manipulation, as a compass that points you toward truth. Let's ground this in something practical. We see this dynamic clearly in the story of individuals who've gone through toxic relationships. This pattern emerges consistently in therapeutic contexts. Someone manipulates them, gaslights them, makes them question their own reality. And for months or even years after leaving, they replay every conversation, every argument, every lie. People on the outside say, "Move on, stop dwelling," but they can't, because their mind is doing necessary work. It's reconstructing what actually happened. It's separating truth from deception. It's validating their experience so they never fall for it again. This isn't weakness. This is recovery. This is how empaths heal. They have to process the entire relationship frame by frame. They have to see where they ignored red flags, where they gave away their power, where they betrayed themselves to keep the peace. And yes, it's painful. Yes, it takes time. But when it's done, something remarkable happens. They become unhookable. They can spot manipulation from a mile away. They can see narcissistic patterns in the first conversation. They never have to learn that lesson again, because they fully digested it. This is the power of the replay when used consciously. It turns your worst experiences into your greatest teachers. It transforms pain into wisdom, trauma into immunity. And this is something only certain people can do, because most people don't have the psychological depth to sit with discomfort long enough to extract meaning from it. They distract, they numb, they move on without actually processing. But you can't do that. Your mind won't let you. And that's not a curse. That's a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one. So where does this leave us? If you've made it this far, you're probably recognizing yourself in these patterns. You're probably realizing that the thing you've been ashamed of is actually a sign of advanced psychological functioning. And that realization alone changes everything. Because shame disconnects you from your power, but understanding reconnects you. It allows you to reclaim the narrative, to stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as rare. You're not like most people. You never will be. And that's not something to fix. That's something to honor. Yes, it means you'll process life differently. Yes, it means social interactions will require more energy. Yes, it means you'll need more alone time to digest everything you absorb. But it also means you'll live with a level of awareness that most people never access. You'll see beauty others overlook. You'll feel connection others can't reach. You'll understand human nature in ways that take others a lifetime to learn. And here's the paradox. The very thing that makes you feel isolated is the thing that could make you invaluable. Because the world needs people who can see through lies, who can detect shadow, who can hold space for complexity, who can integrate opposing truths without collapsing into binary thinking. The world needs empaths who've done the work, who've turned their sensitivity into strength, who've mastered the replay instead of being mastered by it. This is your path. It's not easy. It's not comfortable, but it's deeply meaningful. And meaning is what sustains us when everything else falls away. So stop apologizing for your depth. Stop trying to speed up your process. Stop comparing yourself to people who skim the surface of life while you dive into the depths. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You're becoming conscious. You're integrating shadow. You're learning to trust your inner knowing over external opinion. And that takes time. That takes patience. That takes courage. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you were told to be. Not who would make others comfortable, but who you actually are, beneath all the conditioning. And for empaths, that journey requires facing the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject, the sensitivity, the intensity, the need to process everything deeply. These aren't flaws, these are features. And when you stop fighting them and start working with them, everything changes. The replay becomes a meditation, a practice, a sacred ritual where you sit with your experiences and ask, what are you here to teach me? And your psyche answers, sometimes with insights, sometimes with warnings, sometimes with confirmations of what you already knew, but were afraid to believe. And each time you do this, you get stronger, you get clearer, you get more aligned with your truth. Until one day, you realize you're no longer controlled by the thoughts. You're no longer haunted by past conversations. Because you've integrated them. You've digested them. You've transformed them into wisdom. This is psychological digestion at its finest. This is what it means to honor your empathic nature instead of suppressing it. This is how you turn a so-called weakness into genuine power. And once you do, you become a force, Not a loud force, not an aggressive force, but a quiet, grounded, unmovable force that knows itself, that trusts itself, that cannot be swayed by manipulation or gaslighting or social pressure. Because you've done the inner work, you've faced your shadow, you've integrated your gifts, and now you move through the world with a clarity that others can only aspire to. So if you're still replaying that conversation from last week, don't shame yourself. Don't try to force yourself to let it go. Instead, ask it what it needs you to see. What truth is it pointing toward? What pattern is it revealing? What part of you is it trying to protect? And then listen. Really listen. Because your psyche is always speaking. It's always guiding you toward integration. But you have to be willing to hear it. You have to be willing to sit in the discomfort long enough to receive the message. And when you do, when you finally extract the wisdom and integrate the lesson, you'll feel a shift, a release. Not because you forced it, but because the work is complete. The replay has served its purpose. It brought something unconscious into consciousness. It transformed confusion into clarity, pain into understanding. And now you can move forward, not by forgetting, but by truly learning, not by numbing, but by feeling fully, not by running, but by staying present with yourself through the entire process. This is what it means to have rare empathic traits. This is what Carl Jung was pointing toward when he spoke about individuation, the journey of becoming whole. The integration of all parts of yourself, including the parts that society tells you are too much. You're not too much. You're exactly enough. And the people who can't handle your depth aren't your people. Let them go. Let them skim the surface. You were made for the depths. You were made to see what others can't see, to feel what others won't feel, to know what others refuse to know. And that's your power. That's your gift. That's why you replay conversations in your head, not because you're broken, but because you're advanced. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to face the truth. Not because you're stuck, but because you're integrating at a pace that honors your unique psychological wiring. Trust the process. Trust yourself. Trust that your mind knows what it's doing, even when it feels overwhelming, because it does. And one day, you'll look back and realize that every replay, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt was preparing you for exactly who you're becoming. You're not broken. You're not too sensitive. You're not overthinking. You're processing life at a depth most people will never reach. And that makes you rare. That makes you valuable. That makes you exactly what this world needs. So keep replaying. Keep integrating. Keep trusting your intuition. Because you're not just surviving, you're evolving. And that evolution is where your true power lives. See you in the next dimension. In the Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.